Warning: this video will include a discussion of mature topics from an explicit movie and spoilers. If you don't want the movie to be spoiled and you don't want to hear about mature and explicit themes, turn back now. I wouldn't recommend this movie to anyone. There's a lot of explicit scenes and language. That being said, I've always appreciated this movie. It's so philosophically complicated, and for that, it's been my favorite movie since I first saw it when I was in high school. This video is going to be the most personal video I've made so far. I feel like I have to talk about my life because Fight Club has been my favorite movie, and it was integral to my experience growing up and maturing. But I have to admit, when I was younger, I was a bit of a Tyler Durden defender. It wasn't so much that I actually thought he was a good guy or that I agreed with him on everything. I wasn't that dumb. I knew that the movie was intentionally showing that he was going too far and becoming too radical, but I defended him because I found his radical philosophy to be appealing. I think it still is appealing to any lost young men who are struggling with finding a purpose, and that was definitely me. If you feel like Ed Norton's character in the movie, then you see Tyler the same way he sees Tyler. Here's a guy who is accurately identifying the problems with my life and with society, and while his solutions are definitely radical, they're at least compelling. This movie challenged me to think more critically about my life, my purpose, life's purpose, and what it means to be a man. Thank God I eventually found guys like Jordan Peterson and discovered what true masculinity looks like through Christianity. Now that I'm a Christian, I have a real framework for understanding and analyzing this movie, and that's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you today. But first we have to establish the biggest spoiler in the movie before we can proceed. Ed Norton's nameless character, known simply as the narrator, is actually the same person as Brad Pitt's character, Tyler Durden. Tyler is just an alter ego formed by his fragmented psyche. So throughout this video, I may sometimes refer to the characters as two separate people, and I may sometimes refer to them as one, but they are really the same guy. So let's get into it. The narrator has a formulaic job and a formulaic life. Everything about his life is mundane and boring. From a biblical perspective, men need dragons to slay and challenges to conquer. We need a mission, a purpose, and an adventure. In Christianity, God can give us that, but without it, we could feel meaningless and purposeless. This is nihilism, that sinking feeling you get that you weren't made for this mundane world and that life is ultimately meaningless. To make matters worse, he lives alone in isolation, which contributes to that feeling. Instead of doing something to fix his life, he self-medicates by binging TV and buying expensive furniture. He's obsessed with the IKEA catalog. All in all, he's spiritually sick, which contributes to mental and physical sickness as well, and he's just self-medicating with unhealthy behaviors. This lifestyle contributes to him suffering from insomnia. He's not really living. When you have insomnia, you're never really asleep or truly awake. He goes to the doctor for medication as though that's going to fix his problems. This highlights how often we have real spiritual sickness, and yet we think that our doctors can just prescribe our way out of the issue. The doctor recommends he checks out recovery groups if he wants to see what real suffering truly looks like. The recovery groups he attends actually starts to bring him some relief. It's strange because he's a faker and a tourist in these groups. He doesn't suffer from the problems that these people suffer with, but he finds a sort of catharsis in crying with other guys and learning how to let go a little bit. I think that he gets some relief from these groups because it's really the first time that he's acknowledging his feelings and he's looking inward to uncover them. And it's the first time that he's surrounded in a community of other guys doing the same. This is how I felt when I was first finding some relief through self-improvement before I eventually became a Christian. When you first get into self-improvement, it feels like you found an outlet to better yourself and to be more vulnerable with others, especially if you start attending a recovery group. You're surrounded by a community of people who are trying to improve, and the group teaches you some basic tools to help you examine yourself better and to cope. Self-improvement does all of that very well, but the problem is that the online self-improvement community just can't be enough. Self-improvement is meaningless if you don't have a greater purpose in life. People need religion, and without it, they're either going to be nihilistic, they'll make their own religion, or they'll find a fraudulent one. Fight Club shows this perfectly. Tyler Durden is a nihilist, and he openly expresses how meaningless he thinks life is. So in order to create his own meaning, he slowly rebels against society, creates Fight Club, builds it up into a terrorist organization that's both fascist in some ways and anti-capitalist in other ways. So nihilism gives way to a sort of personal radicalism, later leading to collective political radicalism. This could have easily happened to me had I not become a Christian. I was trying to derive my own meaning in life by forging my own religion, and I was drifting towards political radicalism. Christianity actually gave me a meaning and purpose in life which killed any nihilism that I once had. I'm now on a mission and a quest from God. After I got baptized, I started this channel. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10. But people all over the world are flocking to shallow, fraudulent religions like Disney worship or sports teams or even political ideologies. They act as if these temporary, fickle things could possibly stand in for eternal truth or replace the God-shaped holes in their hearts, but it never will. We see this in Fight Club. It's never enough for Tyler. He has to keep escalating things to feel something. At first, he tries filling that God-shaped hole in his heart with consumerism. He thinks that buying stuff will help.
We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. What concerns me are celebrity magazines, television with 500 channels, some guy's name on my underwear, Rogaine, Viagra. The things you own end up owning you. But an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives.
So later in the movie, he's totally rejecting that philosophy and he's vehemently anti-capitalist. He doesn't realize it at first, but he's actually blessed that he loses all of his possessions. His alter ego, Tyler, blows up the whole apartment and he loses everything. And at first, it's tragic to him. He thought his life was almost complete with all the stuff that he was buying.
I was close to being complete. All gone. All gone.
But this is obviously false. It was really a blessing in disguise for him to lose it all and to learn how to move forward from it. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Matthew 6:19-20. Later in the movie, he forms the terrorist organization Project Mayhem, and Tyler gives the members missions and tasks so they feel like they're accomplishing something, but it's nothing like the mission that God could give you. And that horrible feeling you might get when you look around at this world and you feel like you don't belong here is actually proof of heaven. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. C.S. Lewis. Tyler rejects this kind of thinking. Interestingly, I don't think that there is any point in the movie where he denies the existence of God. In fact, I think he seems to imply that God might be real, but he believes that God has abandoned us and that we should live in rebellion against him because of that. This kind of thinking is a step beyond nihilism. It's not so much that life is just meaningless, but that we can derive our own meaning in life by actively rebelling against God. That's satanic. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. John 10:10. I know many might say that the belief that God has abandoned us is deist, and yes, that's correct. But the idea that we should rebel against God is satanic. Tyler slowly drags the narrator down that path, and things only get more and more radical and extreme as a result. I like that the movie is implicitly connecting radicalism, extremism, terrorism, and rebellion to a deeply satanic philosophy. That is exactly how it functions in the real world too.
You have to consider the possibility that God does not like you, never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen.
It isn't.
We don't need him. We are God's unwanted children, so be it!
The narrator's life is so meaningless, he doesn't even have a name. His alter ego gives him purpose in life, which is why he's named Tyler. Even the members of Project Mayhem renounce their names and choose to live anonymously. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Proverbs 14:12. The movie is extremely aware of how unfulfilling and unsatisfying consumerism really is as a solution to anything. It's why Tyler eventually slides into a form of radical anti-capitalism. The narrator spends a large part of his job traveling around the country and describes how awful it is that everything he consumes and uses are these single-use plastics, and all the people he meets on flights are single-serving friends. It's shallow and meaningless. Even his relationship with Marla is like that at first. Marla is a fascinating character. She shows up to the same recovery groups the narrator is attending, and it starts to crush him. He can't get any sleep at night or any relief from the groups because he knows that she's there, and that she's also a tourist and faker just like him. Her presence there holds up a mirror to his own fraud, and he can't stand it. She invades his mind constantly, to the point where when he looks inside of himself to his special cave, he just sees Marla there. This is what living without Christianity can be like. If you look inwards to yourself, you'll find it unsatisfying because you suck. And if you look outwardly to the rest of the world, you'll also find that unsatisfying, because the world sucks. Anyways, Marla probably comes across as attractive to the narrator because she's so unafraid of death. Again, this is a recurring theme in the movie that we'll talk about later, but Marla kind of wants to die. She's so nihilistic, she's basically suicidal. She just doesn't care about anything, and as a result has let go of the concept of living a normal life, and she's let go of morals. She steals and does drugs, and she lives a generally reckless life. At one point in the movie, Marla makes a comment about her dress. It's a single-use dress. This was a bridesmaid's dress from a wedding which was thrown away, and she picked it up for dirt cheap at a thrift store. Just like the narrator, she sees something tragic about consumerism and waste too. But this dress is also a symbol for their relationship. The narrator's alter ego Tyler is just using Marla for pleasure. They don't have a strong relationship built on love or sacrifice like a biblical relationship. Every night, Tyler is just using and abusing Marla, and then every morning, she just gets tossed out. Without a vision, the people cast off restraint, but happy is he who keeps the law. Proverbs 29:18. I think that even though this movie wrestles strongly with nihilism and meaninglessness, it tries to posit several solutions, none of which actually work. It posits that reclaiming and recentering your masculinity could help you, but that doesn't actually work if you don't have a proper framework for true masculinity, which is something that we'll discuss in the next section. It posits that you could live in active rebellion against society, but that's not fulfilling, and only continues to escalate with time to try and fill that hole. One philosophy that the movie plays with is the concept of nihilism leading to absurdity. If anyone is familiar with the Greek philosopher Diogenes, he was very much about this kind of lifestyle. Diogenes believed that you could live with nothing and take no possessions. He believed in letting everything go, including societal norms, and breaking free from everything. The narrator and Tyler kind of do this. We'll talk more about that concept later, but throughout the movie, their nihilism does lead them to renouncing just about everything and embracing their most primal, base instincts. This is an unbiblical solution to feeling devoid of purpose. God intentionally designed humans to be distinct and set apart from animals. We shouldn't give in to our most primal animal instincts, but this kind of thing is posited as a real solution in the movie. The whole Fight Club itself is a way for them to let out their violence and embrace it, and the narrator's relationship with Marla is a way for them to pursue animalistic desire without any real love. I'm not sure how Tyler squares this with his contradictory belief in the importance of voluntary hardship, voluntary suffering, sacrifice, and pain. See, these things are the kinds of things that actually are compatible with a Christian philosophy, and where I would actually start to kind of agree with Tyler. Tyler knows that rigid self-discipline is important, and that no progress is made without pain or sacrifice.
Like the first monkey shot into space. Without pain, without sacrifice, we would have nothing.
I agree with this. But then they live contradictory lives when they choose to embrace their most base desires. All of this is just an attempt to find purpose and meaning in life. When he first starts Fight Club, it works at least temporarily. Fighting becomes his purpose in life, to the point where he's at work and all he's doing is looking forward to going and fighting. I can kind of relate to this. Sometimes when I'm at work, I just look forward to going to church, or coming home to my wife, or to make these YouTube videos. Work can feel very meaningless when you have a greater purpose outside of work. The narrator feels this so subconsciously that his alter ego takes on multiple different jobs, like a soap salesman, a waiter, and a film projectionist. All three of these jobs are just ways for Tyler to rebel against society and cause mayhem, but we'll talk more about that later. Like I said earlier, the other solution to nihilism that the movie proposes is reclaiming your masculinity. This isn't horrible advice. It's actually pretty good advice. If you're a man struggling with life, it's crucial that you reclaim your masculinity and figure out what that looks like. The problem with Fight Club is that these guys reclaim a false form of masculinity. It's a very dangerous and unhealthy form of masculinity that has no biblical basis. So for that reason, in this video, I'm just going to call it false masculinity, and that's because I believe that true masculinity is found in Scripture. One of the key problems with their form of masculinity is that it reduces being a man down to pure biology. Throughout the movie, there is a recurring obsession with male genitalia as though that's all that matters and all that really distinguishes a man from a woman. I believe that the Bible shows us exactly what being a real man looks like, and it entails self-sacrifice, humility, leading others, especially our families, with courage and bravery, standing up to evil, and also submission to God. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, let all that you do be done with love. 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and 14. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Matthew 23:11. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil and he will flee from you. James 4:7. All of these things are taught and practiced social behaviors that no man is born with. You have to adopt these things to become a man. But to the guys in Fight Club, masculinity is reduced to biology and our animalistic nature. All that matters is genitalia, sexuality, and primal instincts. Sadly, there are many people today who want to reduce masculinity down to these things in a very similar way, but that's a story for another time. When the narrator is complaining about losing all of his stuff at his apartment, Tyler tells him it would be worse if he lost his genitals, the symbol for his masculinity. When the narrator first starts attending recovery groups, one of the groups he found the most cathartic was a testicular cancer group. There was something about these guys losing a key part of their manhood which made the narrator feel better about himself. And again, it shows just how much this movie hyper-focuses on biology. At the group, he meets Bob. This guy used to be a bodybuilder. He was the stereotypical masculine man, but now he's not. He's a divorced, sad shell of a man crying for relief. The problem is that crying and hugging doesn't really bring relief to men. Letting go of our ego and our pride does bring us relief, but we'll discuss that more later. The guys in Fight Club attempt to reclaim their masculinity in a super unhealthy and unsatisfying way. For them, they think it's all about having sex with women and violently exerting themselves, sometimes at the same time, if you catch my drift. Fight Club is all about guys letting out their aggression and embracing violence towards each other. It's violent and abusive. And on a similar note, Tyler's relationship with Marla is also violent and abusive because it's based around him using her. That's what these guys think masculinity is all about. So it's really no wonder why this slowly escalated into an extremist terrorist organization. This is just about as unsatisfying as nihilism. Also notice how doing this stuff doesn't actually cure the narrator's mental health. When the narrator didn't sleep and struggled with insomnia, at least Tyler wasn't around. Once the narrator starts sleeping fine, Tyler shows up and only gets more and more active at night while the narrator thinks he's asleep. So this kind of false masculinity doesn't cure his problems but just exacerbates them. For these guys, they don't do anything out of love or service. There's no humility, no self-control, it's all about domination. That's why I don't consider it real masculinity at all. The Bible shows that real masculinity is rooted in obedience to God. That's where we derive our meaning and purpose in our lives. That's how we fight nihilism. We don't manufacture meaning through self-destruction. Better a patient man than a warrior, one who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Proverbs 16:32. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. We can choose to act in accordance with our most primal instincts, or we have the free will to be better than that. I believe that Jesus can get down into our hearts and help our motivations. He can cure us internally before we act out externally. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. John 15:13. In Fight Club, these guys have such a fragile sense of masculinity that it's though they feel a strong need to hyperfixate on it and dominate others with it. They feel some need to impose it on everyone else, and tons of guys willingly join Fight Club because they see it as a new way to gain a new community when the rest of their life is out of control. As a part of Tyler's broader mission of rebelling against society, he takes a job as a film projectionist so he can splice frames of porn into the movies. He's forcibly exposing these things to families because, again, he has a satanic philosophy. Pornography is the devil's inversion of what healthy sexuality looks like, but Tyler weaponizes that against people by exposing them to it unwillingly. Part of why he has a struggle with his own masculinity is because of his relationship with his parents. He talks about growing up not really knowing his father and having a bad relationship with him. They feel like their whole generation was raised by women, and now they feel emasculated and feminized. In rebellion, they don't want to get jobs or to get married like regular people. They just want their violent boys club and to use women for sexual pleasure and domination. The recovery groups can help in some sense with masculinity because they are a good outlet for guys to talk about their problems and to find community in that. And throughout the movie, he keeps this model as it escalates. Both the original Fight Club and even Project Mayhem are kind of like forms of recovery for these guys to maintain their anonymity and secrecy while having an outlet to express themselves. The problem with the initial recovery groups is that they are too inwardly focused, and that's selfish. Like I said, real masculinity is about helping others and focusing your energy into other people. It's about helping and serving others. When your self-improvement focus is all about you, it becomes self-serving, and Tyler correctly identifies that as like a form of masturbation.
Self-improvement is masturbation. Now self-destruction.
He's kind of right. But for us, we have Christ to orient ourselves and to empty ourselves. Tyler doesn't. So he turns to self-destruction over self-improvement. This is an act of rebellion, and we'll discuss that more later. In a biblical context, true self-improvement is called sanctification, and that's the process of becoming more and more like Christ. When you learn how to daily submit yourself to Christ through prayer and fasting and discipline, you become more and more like Him. It's a process of dying to yourself and emptying yourself daily until you live in submission to God's will. Sometimes it can be a painful process to let go of these things, but it's important to let go and let God take the wheel. We'll talk more about this later, but the movie emphasizes letting go. They just don't have God to take it over from there. They do have the concept of voluntary suffering and embracing pain as a pathway to progress. And this is a Christian thing too. Like the Bible tells us to do, we can embrace our pain and suffering knowing that it has a purpose and knowing that Christ suffered much more. When we suffer, He's with us in that suffering. Christianity isn't about avoiding pain and hurt like the prosperity gospel teachers will preach, but it's about embracing life's hurts and pains, knowing that it has a purpose. I would argue being able to do this well is also masculine. The guys in Fight Club learn to do this too, but they believe their suffering ultimately has no real meaning or purpose. Embracing their suffering is about letting go and hitting rock bottom. That's why they let people beat them up. Not only is true masculinity about living in submission to God, but it's also about learning who you should voluntarily and willingly submit yourself to. Your boss at work should be one of those people whose office and role you respect and submit to out of respect. The narrator does not. He stands up to his boss with threats and fear tactics to establish dominance. As much as you might want to stick it to your boss someday, this is just not a biblical way of handling conflict or work issues with your boss. Your wife is also someone who you should be working together with in a symbiotic and synergistic way. Tyler doesn't take a wife. Instead, he dominates his girlfriend by using her for violent sex and then kicking her to the curb. This is false masculinity. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Ephesians 5:25. One of the things this movie does well is show just how dangerous false masculinity is to our society. Like it or not, but men largely run the world, and without them, society can't function. All of the guys in Project Mayhem are regular working class guys with regular jobs. They work at restaurants and other businesses. It's a huge mistake to mess with these guys or even to allow them to feel as nihilistic or as emasculated as they do. Now these guys are trying to reclaim their masculinity in their own messed up way. And if you mess with that, unfortunately, they'll just bite back harder. And that's what they threaten to do when the police are trying to investigate them. They threaten to castrate a guy for the investigation. Once again, hyper-focusing on genitalia as if that's the most important thing. Guys like this exist in our world. Disillusioned young men with no purpose or meaning are the most dangerous. They commit all kinds of crimes and even mass shootings. It's a rebellion against society, and we'll talk more about that later. This is why I'm so glad I found Jordan Peterson when I did. A lot of young guys feel purposeless and disillusioned, and when they gravitate towards clowns like Nick Fuentes or Andrew Tate, it can lead them down a dangerous road of false masculinity. This causes not just problems in their lives, but in society broadly. It's crucial for guys to follow a more biblical or Jordan Peterson model of masculinity that actually helps men become thriving and functioning members of society. Fight Club does a great job showing how false masculinity is a slippery slope towards fascism and authoritarianism. Historically, this is true. Young, disillusioned men who are fed up with society have always been leaders of rebellions and revolutions, which often lead to authoritarian or fascist regimes. I'd argue that's part of what's happening now with so many young men flocking to guys like Nick Fuentes. Project Mayhem shows this as well. It didn't take long before the Fight Club escalated into a terrorist organization. As an adult, I can see how Fight Club hyper-focuses too much on genitalia and biology in an unhealthy way. But as a young guy, the reclamation of masculinity that Fight Club offers was appealing to me. After all, it does sound better than being a sick, mindless automaton. It's better than living for consumerism or an unfulfilling job. But the problem is that this form of masculinity is also very unfulfilling, and so it doesn't take long before Tyler slides into acts of extremism and rebellion. As promised, we have to talk about rebellion. It's throughout the movie. These guys rebel against themselves, society, and God in general. That's why I said earlier it's a secretly satanic philosophy. Satan is the symbol for rebellion against God, and when he slowly invades your life and your philosophy, you find rebellion against society broadly, and even self-destructive behaviors to rebel against yourself. We see this all throughout the movie. Like I said, Marla has super loose morals and doesn't really care about her health or well-being, so she steals and does drugs and lives recklessly. Tyler is the same way. He steals a car at one point, he's constantly smoking. They start the whole Fight Club because they don't care about their appearances or their safety. His initial rebellion in society involves blowing up his own apartment, committing a majorly serious crime.
Reject the basic assumption of civilization, especially the importance of material possessions.
Look, nobody takes this more seriously than me. That condo was my life, okay? I loved every stick of furniture in that place. That was not just a bunch of stuff that got destroyed. It was me.
He gets a job as a waiter just to pee and spit into people's food. It's important to recognize that he's specifically working at a high-end restaurant just to rebel against rich people. He gets a job as a film projectionist to splice porn into the movies to mess with people. They embrace always having a messed up appearance from having gotten into their fights to rebel against norms, and they even lack decent hygiene for the same reasons. Again, much of this is a very Diogenes way of living. They're rebelling against all of life. One form of rebellion that I find interesting is that Tyler instills the fear of death into people to motivate them to follow and pursue their dreams. It's insane work to put a gun to some guy's head and threaten him to go follow his dreams. But it works. Again, these guys feel that their lives are unsatisfying and meaningless, and so Tyler shows them that life is fragile and that they need to follow their dreams or get shot. This guy in particular really wanted to be a veterinarian, but he wasn't pursuing it, so Tyler threatens him and takes his license to keep tabs on him. Later, we see that he's done the same thing with tons of guys. But back to more overt rebellions, the violence that they inflict against each other is a form of rebellion against their own bodies. And obviously Project Mayhem is the ultimate form of rebellion. It's a terrorist organization that's designed to cause chaos and rebel against society. In particular, it's anti-capitalist. At one point, they're talking about different people that they would want to fight, and they mention Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi as two people they wish they could fight.
Any historical figure?
I'd fight Gandhi.
Good answer.
How about you?
Lincoln.
So now they want to rebel against even the peaceful heroes of society. He even fantasizes about crashing out at work and killing people and threatens his boss with the thought of it. The more trouble they keep getting into with the law, the more they have to run and evade the police. And even the sex that Tyler has with Marla is violent, because it rebels against God's initial design and intention for sex. They steal bags of fat from a liposuction place so that they could turn it into bars of soap, and then they sell these bars of soap at department stores. Their stated goal in this is to sell rich people's fat back to them. Much of the chaos that Project Mayhem causes is targeted directly against the rich. That's why their ultimate plan in the end is to blow up major credit card and banking institutions, just to crash the whole economy. When Project Mayhem first begins, their first assignment is just to start a fight with a random stranger. Most people don't want to fight back, and they'll do anything to avoid a fight, so this initial attempt at rebellion just doesn't really work. Slowly, they have to keep escalating things to make it more extreme. The narrator, for instance, blackmails his boss by beating himself up just to blame it on the boss, and then threatens to expose company secrets. His goal was just to take a year's worth of salary without ever having to work again, and the blackmail works. This is extortion. Slowly, Project Mayhem inflicts more and more arson and destruction across the city. But what's interesting is that these rebels form their own rules to govern their organization. As a fight club, the rules and structure were fairly loose, but as Project Mayhem, they take on a very disciplined and rigid organization. Again, this shows just how easy it is for rebellion to slide into fascism, and their restrictions get worse and worse with time. They all start to wear the same thing, and they abandon their own names just to become like mindless bots. When Bob gets shot by the cops, they call the cops pigs. These guys are now at war with the police. All who take the sword will perish by the sword. Matthew 26:52. The Lord tests the righteous, but the wicked and the one who loves violence his soul hates. Psalm 11:5. Another major recurring theme in this movie is death. The fear of death is constantly referenced, and characters are constantly almost facing death, whether they care to or not. The narrator's whole job is centered around death because he works on car crash insurance claims. From a biblical perspective, death is something to fear if you don't have God or you don't know what comes next. For these characters, they might just think that it's lights out and that there's no life after death. That's kind of terrifying. As Christians, we know that there is life after death, and that it's of the utmost importance to be justified before God before your death. And so for that reason, we don't have to fear death. We believe in the resurrection of Christ, and that changes everything for us. We'll no longer fear death, and we can even look forward to dying and being with him, that I may know him in the power of his resurrection, in the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death. Philippians 3:10. But that doesn't mean that we're going to live recklessly or suicidally so that we can die. It doesn't mean that we'll stop caring about this life. The Apostle Paul said that as much as he wanted to die to go be with Christ, he knew that he had an important purpose that he needed to fulfill in this life, and we do too. So for that reason, we want to seize every day and live in accordance with God's will as much as possible to fulfill our purpose while we're still here. Sometimes that kind of philosophy is summed up by the Latin phrase memento mori, which translates to remember that you will die. This phrase and some of the artwork associated with it intentionally reminds people that they will die and that their time on this earth is short and limited. So you have to make the best out of it while you still can. In his own sick and twisted way, this is kind of what Tyler does when he threatens people with death if they don't follow their dreams. I just think that him doing that is a sign of his contradictory and confusing philosophy. If life is meaningless and we're here to rebel against it all, then what does it matter that anyone goes and follows their dreams? The only thing that Tyler is right on is that he's constantly reminding people of the short time they have on this planet. He has a sort of memento mori philosophy.
First you have to know, not fear. Know that someday you're gonna die.
He reminds people that when they lose the fear of death, it changes everything. And like I said previously, that's the most true for Christians. We can live in the power of the resurrection and no longer be afraid. But when these guys lose their fear of death, it just means that they're going to pursue reckless and dangerous living. This includes at one point intentionally getting into a car accident just to see what happens and to overcome their fear of death. It's just stupidity. Tyler does expose the contradiction with those who are often nihilistic and suicidal though. At one point, the narrator is kind of fantasizing about dying on a business trip. I think this demonstrates pretty well how he just doesn't want to live anymore. But when push comes to shove and his life is on the line later in the movie, he's scared to let it go. I think most people who feel like they're on the edge are just like this. It's not really that you want to die, but more so that you just want to find a real meaning and purpose in life. I know exactly what that's like. There was a time in my life when I didn't really want to live anymore, but I knew I didn't want to die. so I was kind of just living right on the edge and seeking for anything that could save me. But nothing did until I truly came to believe and trust in Jesus. Marla is definitely the first character in the movie who really truly has no fear of death. At one point she gets really close to it when she almost dies from an overdose. Like I said earlier, Project Mayhem members renounce their names and they choose to live anonymously. But when Robert Paulson is shot and killed, it deeply distresses the narrator because he knew that guy personally from recovery before Project Mayhem. He tries to remind everyone that this was a real man named Robert Paulson, but it backfires when they take the wrong lesson. These guys take it to mean that only in death are Project Mayhem members given a name. In this way, they start to find meaning in life through their death, so they start idolizing martyrdom like a jihadist. They've created a death cult. In Christianity, while we do have martyrs, we aren't encouraged to die for the cause. We live for now. We live to help build the kingdom of heaven on earth while we're still alive and to bring as many people into that kingdom as we can. It's quite literally the opposite of a death cult. The death that we respect with the most praise and honor is Jesus' crucifixion, which was a sacrifice taken on our behalf. But because of his death, now we can truly live. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Philippians 2:8. The last recurring theme I'd like to talk about in this movie is the concept of letting go. It kind of encapsulates everything that we've talked about previously. Since consumerism is such a problem, you have to learn to let it go, and the characters in the movie do. Since fear of death is such a problem, you have to learn to let it go, but they do this in an unhealthy and dangerous way. Since they think that society is a problem, they let it go, and they live on the edges. And since they think that they're restrained by what they deem to be phony morals and ethics, they let those go too. It's like the whole movie is about letting go, whether you should or shouldn't. The narrator lets go of his apartment and all of his furniture just to live in a run-down, abandoned house. And even before that, the narrator is learning to let go in his recovery groups and just to be vulnerable and cry with other men. Letting go is actually a crucial part of recovery, which the narrator never really does. Part of this is because he lives as a liar and a tourist in the recovery groups, and he's never honest about that. Part of it is that he's too selfishly focused because he has no higher power. The first 3 steps in the 12-step program are all about learning how powerless you are to your problems, acknowledging that you must let go, and letting God take over. Some people can only do this once they've hit rock bottom, or what some might call the gift of desperation. Tyler recognizes that as a gift, and recognizes how important it is to hit rock bottom to let everything go.
It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything.
When all of life is out of control and you feel like you can't do anything about it, you have to let it all go. The problem is that he never lets God take over. He's let go of God too. We do find freedom in losing everything and letting go. It can help us find a new purpose. I do believe that's why the 12-step recovery groups work so well. But our form of letting go is mostly about learning to relinquish our pride and allowing God to guide us towards his will. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. 1 Peter 5:5. Since the narrator never really gets that experience, things just continue to escalate. When accepting applicants for Project Mayhem, they intentionally only choose guys who are willing to be rejected over and over again and wait outside for 3 days without any food or water. These guys are willing to let everything go just to join this organization. Their symbolic death for 3 days is like a twisted inversion of Christ's crucifixion. They are letting go of everything to embrace this new lifestyle and gain acceptance to the group, but they must first have 3 days of rejection and even learn to reject their own physical needs through fasting. And when they finally join Project Mayhem, they shave their heads to become space monkeys willing to die for the cause. They've truly let everything go at this point to join a collective where they'll be brainwashed into believing that they aren't special, but just mindless automatons serving a greater good. To kill his alter ego and finally put an end to the madness, he has to be willing to kill himself. And so he does. Throughout the movie, he becomes slowly more and more comfortable with giving up and dying. First, it was in accepting pain and blowing up his apartment. Later, he takes a chance on defusing a bomb when he isn't really sure which wire to pull. Then finally, it all culminates in him being willing to shoot himself just to take out Tyler Durden, his alter ego. By letting go and killing Tyler, he finally puts an end to Project Mayhem and has to just accept the reality of what he's done. We too need to be willing to die to ourselves and to take on voluntary suffering, but not at all in this way. It's about becoming submissive to Christ and allowing him to guide our lives. Ultimately, I think Tyler Durden's philosophy is about power without love, violence without sacrifice, and an identity built on domination and ego. The whole thing is rooted in pride, self-creation, and rebellion against God and his creation. This is exactly what Scripture condemns. Fight Club asks, what are you willing to destroy to feel alive? Christian Masculinity asks, what are you willing to lay down so others may live? And this is why I love this movie so much. I don't think that it ever glorifies or presents these ideas as good, functioning, or healthy ideas. It actually shows you the logical conclusion of such ideas, and it all ends up leading towards death, chaos, and destruction in the end. Like I said, this movie was pivotal to growing up, developing, and maturing, and I'm glad I had this movie when I did. It really helped me figure out what it meant to be a man by showing me exactly what I ought to avoid. Now I'm so glad that I'm a Christian and I have a proper, meaningful framework for what it means to be a man and have purpose in life. And better yet, we have Jesus Christ to look to as the ultimate model for masculinity. If you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments what movie we should break down next. Do you prefer shorter or longer videos? And what do you think is the ideal length of our videos? If you'd like to support more deep dives into the hidden Christian truth in pop culture, consider supporting us on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Thanks for watching.